Articles again today. A lot of students ask me a good question, which is when do we use articles and when do we choose to use no article before a noun? It's a very good question, and the simple answer is that we use no article with uncountable or plural nouns used in a general sense, because we can still use the with uncountable and plural nouns, but that's when it's in the specific sense, when you're referring to something very specific. However, if it's being used in a general sense with uncountable and plural nouns, that's when we need no article. Now that's simple enough. You might think that it's easy, therefore, to choose between article and no article, but it's not easy, because if we just take three words pretty much at random, war, disaster, accident, are they countable or uncountable? And the irritating answer is they are both. Sometimes they're countable, sometimes they're uncountable, and the only way you'll know, therefore, if to use article or no article is to feel if they're countable or uncountable. Uncountable usually refers to the activity rather than a singular instance, and I'll explain that in a moment. But if you're really unsure, you can check in any good advanced learner's dictionary, and you'll see that loads of words are actually uncountable and countable at the same time. It depends what meaning you want to give the word. So let's take some examples of uncountable war. War is a racket. This was a famous saying by, or a famous quote from an American general, and he was trying to say that the activity of war is a racket, in the sense of a criminal enterprise, in the sense that somebody's always making a profit from war, and that's why you will always get war, because there's money to be made. And he's clearly talking about the activity and not about a conflict in one place. If you're talking about a conflict in one place, you probably need to use the countable form of war. But when you're just talking about the activity, war is hell. Here you just mean generally that war is hell, so you're certainly talking about an uncountable form of war. And hell, by the way, is very often used uncountably. He is in heaven, or he is in hell. We don't usually put an article before heaven and hell. They're usually used uncountably too. And so that might surprise you. You might expect to see them used countably. He is in the hell, as in the one and only hell. Well, no, that's not how it's used. Always check a good dictionary. And here we see all's fair in love and war. Here I hope you can see that both of those objects, love and war, are being used uncountably. You can use love countably as well. It's another good example of a word, a noun, which is countable or uncountable, because you can speak of a love of something, or a love for someone, and so you can make it a singular love, a countable love. Again, knowing where you can and can't, you have to become familiar with some of the expressions. So I've written some expressions here. To declare war, I think that's always used uncountably. When you say declare war, you don't usually declare a war on someone, you just declare war on the other country. And so war's used uncountably. To wage war, this one you could use an A in there sometimes. And so again, you've got to feel them here, you've got to be familiar with a lot of the expressions. But it's very often seen uncountably with they waged war against their enemies. And the threat of war, you could also say the threat of a war, but the threat of war is very often used uncountably too. So it really depends if you want to refer to a singular conflict which could break out, in which case you'd need a, or not. You're just talking about the activity of war. Okay, so I've given you two examples of countable war. There was a war in Northern Europe, that's fine, a conflict, a war, and the argument was a war of words. Here, this is kind of saying, it's quite idiomatic, but we'd certainly use an article here. Let's look at disaster now. The party was a disaster. Yeah, you're talking about one singular bad occasion. Or you could say 50 people perished in the disaster, and here you're referring to one which the listener probably has already heard about or read about. Maybe it's a volcano, maybe it's an earthquake, and Here it's countable, it's a disaster, it's a volcano or an earthquake. However, with something like disaster strikes, disaster struck, we use it in an uncountable sense. And if you're familiar with that expression, you'll already realise that you never see an article before it, and so you're using disaster here as the activity, just the activity of disaster, the process of disaster. So disaster struck on my way home. You're not making this one countable. You're using the uncountable noun, and that means that just something terrible happened on my way home. You could also say spell disaster, and in this sentence, when something spells disaster, it's always used uncountably. It's like to declare war. It's always uncountable. So this would spell disaster for the company. And if we look at the last example, which is accident, I did it by accident, would be uncountable accident, but you could also say it was an accident. And so I hope you can see this by expression is very often without an article, as I'll show you up here. But when you do something by accident, you always use accident in the uncountable sense. There are a few other times when accidents used uncountably, but not many. Most of the time it's countable, and you say it was an accident, it wasn't my fault, or I saw a terrible accident on the road on the way to work. Yeah, then it would definitely be countable. Accident in the countable sense. So I now want to just look at some very well-known expressions and ask you, because it seems to me that in all of these expressions we're using some very countable nouns in an uncountable sense. Now, time, you can say I had a great time, I had a wonderful time, and in that sense you're using it countably. And it's also an existential clause, you might notice. I had a great time, I had a wonderful time. But when we're talking about to have enough time to do something, to have time for, you would definitely be using time in an uncountable sense. And there are many other times when you use time uncountably. But work is well known as an uncountable word, yeah? And so you go to work. You don't go to the work. You go to work. You also go home. And I would suggest that home there is being used uncountably. You can't go homes. You can't go a home. You just go home. You also go to bed. Why do we say bed? Why not go to a bed, or go to the bed, or go to your bed? No, just go to bed. You can also say lay in bed as well. And so here it's being used uncountably. And whenever you say I travelled somewhere by car or by train, it seems to me that you're using that, in that expression, the noun is being used uncountably. There's no article at all before it, but it's not plural, it's just by car, by train. And so you're definitely using the noun uncountably, and you can see it with on foot as well. You never say on feet, you never say on a foot, so it's also being used uncountably. So this is what makes articles so difficult when you're choosing article or no article. It's understanding if that noun is used countably or uncountably in that particular expression or phrase or sentence or meaning. If you have any questions about this very difficult topic, please put them under the video, and please follow this course because I'm going to do some more lessons on the difference between countable and uncountable nouns. I hope that should make things clearer. Okay, thanks for watching. Please put a like under the video if you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all soon.